Southern Ohio Farm Show. This is Gigi Neal of OSU Extension in Claremont County, agricultural and natural resources educator.
I'm James Morris, the Agricultural and Natural Resources and Community Development Educator for the Ohio State University Extension in Brown County.
And I'm Brooke Beam, the Ohio State University Extension Educator for Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Community Development in Highland County. And we will be your hosts for the Southern Ohio Farm Show.
Good morning. I'm Dave Apsley. I'm a forester and a natural resources specialist with Ohio State University Extension. Today I'm joining you from Fairmont Cemetery in Jackson, Ohio, and I'd like to introduce you to this beautiful specimen of northern catalpa. This tree is nearly 4 feet in diameter. It's absolutely a wonderful specimen. So how do we identify northern catalpa? Well, the first thing is catalpa is whorled. So you're going to find leaves that are arranged in a whorl. When you get to the twig and you look at that point on the twig, you're actually going to find 3 leaves attached at that same node or point on the twig, which is very unique. It's the only tree species that we commonly find in Ohio that is whorled. We do have a shrub, buttonbush, that also has whorled branching or whorled leaf arrangement and branching, but catalpa is the only tree that's common in Ohio that is whorled. Leaves are simple. Keys say 7 to about 12 or 5 to about 12 inches in length. I commonly see them 8 to 12 inches in length. They're large, they're heart-shaped with lobes at the base, so if you turn them upside down, they look a lot like a heart. They're kind of a light green or a limeish green on top, even lighter on the underside, raised veins, and a velvety, hairy or tomentose feel to the underside. You can see kind of a white color to the underside of this leaf. In the spring, at the tip of the twigs, you're going to see clusters of flowers, spike-like clusters with dozens of flowers that have 5 petals. They're a little over an inch in diameter, the flowers are. They're whitish, but they have these purple and yellowish color tinges or tints on the inside of the flower. Very beautiful in these spikes in late spring. And then later in the year, if I can find them, they will produce, about now they're starting to produce these pods, these elongate bean-looking pods. The pods can be up to 18 inches in length, and they're full of seeds. So even after the leaves fall, you'll see these pods hanging on. Some people call it a cigar tree because the pods resemble somewhat of a cigar. And then finally, another really unique thing about this species is it has a species of caterpillar, and I just lost him. There he is. It has a species of caterpillar that feeds only on catalpa. It's called the catalpa sphinx moth, and it feeds exclusively on northern, and it'll feed on southern catalpa too. You'll find these massive groups of these caterpillars on the undersides of the leaves. If you look at this leaf, it's got a big bite out of it. This one's getting fairly large. It's probably about 2 inches in length, but they can get much larger in length and much bigger in diameter. They can be yellowish with black accents along the back. They can also be very dark in color. A lot of folks like these to fish with, and they make excellent bait. The other thing, you'll have this horn on the tail end of this caterpillar. So again, this is northern catalpa. It's a neat species. You'll also notice it has deeply furrowed bark. This one has a classic nectria canker on it. You can see where a limb has fallen off or died, and it's got that canker on it. And then finally in the winter, they're kind of unique looking because they have such stout branching, and because of that whorled branching, and they support very large leaves. So they look dead. They look like they've been totally dead in the winter. You'll have these crooked branches. You'll rarely see a central leader. They've got really unusual shape and form. They're kind of spooky or eerie looking in the fall and the winter months. They'll also hang on to those pods later into the growing season as well. So thank you for your time, and be sure to spend at least part of your day in the woods.
Hello, my name is Richard Purdin, and I'm with OSU Extension. I'm the Ag and Natural Resource Educator and Community Development Educator for Adams County, Ohio. And today I'm from the field, broadcasting here for the Southern Ohio Farm Show. And we are in a hayfield today, and I want to discuss how to control some of our hard to kill and hard to control summer annual weeds that can really be a threat to our forage stands. So I'm standing in a field that was sowed this year, 2021, in the spring. It was oats, orchard grass, Kentucky bluegrass, and red clover. This was sown by with a conventional drill, using conventional tillage as a soil preparation, which means that when we till the soil, we can actually bring up a lot of seed bank, weed seeds in the seed bank, and give room for growth of weeds in the future. So a lot of times the first year of a forage seeding, we can get a lot of summer annuals growth after the first cutting of forage has been taken place. So our three big competitors in this field is common ragweed, yellow foxtail, and giant foxtail. So how can we, first we need to be able to identify to know how to control. So identifying foxtails can be a challenge. There are three main types of foxtails that can present big challenges to our forage stands and can outcompete our forage, reducing stand and viability over time. The giant foxtail is just as it sounds. It's taller, it kind of has a droopy head, just as you would imagine by the name. The seed head looks like a foxtail. It usually droops over, and that's one way you can tell the difference in giant foxtail. With yellow foxtail, it's more compact head, and it stands straight up, and it's more yellow in color. These two weed species can produce a lot of seed, and when that seed falls down onto the soil, on the surface of the soil, if there is exposed soil that does not have any other vegetation, they can germinate very easily and reproduce for the next growing season. Just as the name implies, they are summer annuals, so during the summertime, usually after our first cutting of the hay has been made, these crops will come and actually can outcompete for sunlight, nutrients, and water with our other forages or desired forages. So what are some ways we can control this or prevent this from happening? Just as always, with weed control, a prevention method is worth a pound a cure when it comes to keeping these weeds out of your hay crop. So some things that we can do early on is make sure that we buy good, viable, clean seed, and we sow at a very good rate. More seed, the better, due to more competition. We need to make sure our fertility is high in our soils, because weeds like acidic conditions, they like low fertility, and especially these weeds. So we need to make sure our pH is in order, and this should be done before the seeding of the new hay crop. So making sure our pH is between 6.5 and 7.0 is critical of keeping these weeds out of our hay crop. Making sure our fertilizer, our fertility is up to snuff, our phosphorus and our potassium levels are adequate. So some other things that we can do, let's say you did everything right and you still have these weeds that come up after the first cutting of hay, and you're afraid that they can reduce stand. So what can we do at this point? So there are mechanical methods. So instead of maybe making another cutting, keeping these weeds from going to seed, we can actually go in here with a bush hog and bush hog it down. Or we can actually do a second cutting if you think you have enough desired forage the first year. We want to be careful though that we don't push the forage too hard the first year on harvest. A harvest can keep the weed pressure down, but they can also reduce the life of the stand of forages, especially our red clover and bluegrass in this stand. Orchard grass can take it a little bit better, but our red clover, the harvest intervals need to be adjusted properly. So other things that we can think about is herbicide control. Now this can be a challenge because especially in mixed stands where we're dealing with both a legume and a grass, because there's not a whole lot of herbicides out there that can kill a grass weed like foxtail or crabgrass or other types of weeds in a grass stand with orchard grass, bluegrass, and other types of forage grasses. So we need to be careful, what herbicides we use. We're very limited on use. So if this was a pure stand of alfalfa or a pure stand of clover, we would be fine at getting rid of our foxtails by using, we could use Post, Select, or even Pursuit and Raptor can be mixed in to control the ragweed on our legume stands. But for our legume mixed stands with grass in them, we are kind of limited. So this actually needs to take place. A herbicide treatment should take place early on at planting. A pre-emergence with Pursuit and Raptor, and maybe mixing some Prowl H2O in there with it can help keep the residual crop or the residual weeds from coming up later on in the season. Management of these weeds is important because they reduce palatability. They can actually make curing harder. So during the harvest, some of these forages, especially like Johnson grass, can actually reduce curing time if our populations are heavy enough, because they hold moisture longer. So they can also be a hindrance to livestock when they're eating this in a hay or even grazing the live plant. Because the seed head of these crops are fuzzy and they have small little seeds, that can actually irritate the gums and the mouth of cattle and create problems with digestibility. So we need to make sure, not only for the case of reducing stand, but overall quality of forage. If we're going to make quality forage, we need to keep weeds out of our forages. If you have any questions on summer annual weed control in your forage crop, don't hesitate to give me a call, 937-544-2339. Everybody have a great day and enjoy the beautiful summer weather.
This segment is going to be all about forage fertility. We'll talk about assessing the situation and identifying the needs through nutrient removal rates and how we can use those nutrient removal rates from harvested hay to calculate the needs for additional fertilizer applications after we harvest. So what are the benefits of a healthy and well fertilized and maintained forage stand? We're going to have, of course, the number one thing we always think of, no matter the crop, is the yield. But we'll also have a more lush stand that's going to be able to outcompete weeds and better help our weed control program. And that means less reliance on additional money spent for herbicides. If we continue to have poor stands, we'll continue to have weed problems no matter how much herbicides we use throughout the year. So a good stand will also help do that. We'll have better recovery after winter. We'll have better winter survival and also better recovery after harvest. But we have to be very careful in the way we approach this to, of course, not over fertilize, but also not to under fertilize. So that sounds complicated, right? We can't have too much, but we have to make sure we put on enough. But we're going to help you make sense of that and help you make those decisions based on a soil test result. So we're going to run through an example here, but no matter what the issue is, and no matter how much information we think we may have, it's always important to take a soil test to, one, confirm that it's a fertility issue, but also to help us calculate those fertility needs. So as we take a look at this field, these are some before and after images from a field that had issues becoming established as a new stand of orchard grass, but also recovering after cutting. So not only, as we mentioned, are we going to help that recovery, but this is important for establishment of our forages as well. So as we take a look here, we see that field is obviously very yellow and very stunted. At this point, this field was about 6 to 8 inches tall, but we see especially the edge of the field seems fine along the ditchways. It's taller, maybe still a little yellow, but definitely a lot taller. Of course, this hayfield had been cut, not yet this spring, but it was in the fall. So as we take a look here, we can see that the field edges here are definitely a lot taller. So what happened in this edge of the field that didn't happen in the rest of the field? It wasn't cut, right? So we could say that it maybe wasn't sprayed. These issues could very well be problems as well, but we ruled out all the other issues. There were no herbicides applied that would have damaged this crop at or after seeding. So then we come down to the cutting is the only thing that had happened in the middle of the field that didn't happen on the edge. So with every cutting, for every ton of hay that we remove 12 pounds of phosphorus from the soil and 48 pounds of potassium from the soil. So with that being said, we can run an example here at the end of this, but this gives you an idea now of what may have happened. Nitrogen was applied, so we had nitrogen being added, but we just didn't have the additional nutrients being replaced after we had cut the middle of this field. The edge of the field there did not have these issues. So after a proper fertility plan was made and applied, the field here made tremendous progress with just in a month and or less. As we see here, here's just another example across that field. It's very stunted, very yellow across that field, and the proper fertilizer here, even with this field being windblown and laid down because it's so large, it was very lush, and you can see the weed control is much better. We don't have really any bare spots. The clover there that you see in the top, the orchard grass has really just flourished and taken over a lot of our weeds in that field as well. And the clover underneath, as I was mentioning, is also still lush and growing. We just have a lot taller and healthier orchard grass. As you can see here, I mentioned the stand was about 6 inches tall before the application of fertilizer. You can see here we're up to 16 inches as it's laying down and up to about 22 to 24 inches if it's straight up and erect and growing tall. Here's just another example of some of these, the edge of the field here. You can see a very large difference in the stand health in this field. So even the brown areas that were decaying and died returned and regrew, had healthy roots and regrew from the entire system. So this is not an example from this field. This is just a general example from other forage fields that we've pulled here in the county as we're assessing the situation. So I mentioned that for every ton of hay, we remove 12 pounds, around 12 pounds of phosphorus and 48 pounds of potassium. And this is researched information from Ohio State and the tri-state area that you can also find for row crops in the Tri-State Fertility Guide. Now, let's put this into perspective here. We see that we've removed, this is a forage field that had been in forages for at least 2 years. And the fertilizer that had been applied was triple 19. And again, this is a separate field, but just as an example. So we put on a balanced fertilizer. So what does that mean? We put on the same amount of fertilizer in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium was all the same put on. But as I mentioned, we're removing much more potassium. So what does our soil sample show here? If you look at our potassium, the third line from the bottom, we're at 43 parts per million. That's what the level of our field is. The recommended rate is 100 to 130. And then the phosphorus is 20 parts per million, just above potassium there. And it's recommended to be 30 to 50. So our potassium is far more deficient than our phosphorus, as we would expect with a balanced fertilizer being applied and an unbalanced level of nutrients being removed. So how can we use this information? Let's take, for example, we have a hay yield of 3 tons per acre. So that means we removed 36 pounds of phosphorus, P2O5, and 144 pounds of potassium, K2O. With that information, we can say, okay, now that we know, let's just say this field was completely level when we started. We were perfectly level. All of the nutrients were exactly where they were supposed to be. We removed 36 pounds and 144 pounds. We apply 300 pounds of triple 19. That means we put on 57 pounds of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So we meet our phosphorus needs, but we only applied less than half of what we need for our potassium. Okay, so that means we're going to have to supplement much more potassium. So using a fertilizer such as there's many other options. This is just one, but a 9-23-30. That means we have 9% nitrogen, 23% phosphorus, and 30% potassium. So that means we put on 27 pounds of nitrogen, 69 pounds of phosphorus, and 90 pounds of potassium. We're still very deficient. We still have a long ways to go, but we met the needs for nitrogen most likely, and then we also met the needs for phosphorus. Potassium, we're still deficient, as I mentioned, but we're much closer than we were with the triple 19. So what we can do here is based on your economic returns, which depends on your input costs and the price of fertilizer, apply additional potassium, such as potash of 0060, to meet those additional phosphorus requirements or potassium requirements. So what we're doing, we actually have some research going on here in Brown County on just this problem. The field that you looked at there from the soil sample is a field that we're working with. We made an application of 9-23-30 to the entire field. We're going to look on a replicated trial of 3 replications of coming back in later this year, and actually just within here in the next couple of months, of applying an additional rate that was needed for potassium. Does it pay off, or would we have been okay with the 300 pounds? That's the big question that a lot of us have. Okay, well, we didn't completely supply that 144 pounds. Is 90 pounds close enough? In an ideal, in terms of what we look at here, it wouldn't be, but from an economical and a return on investment standpoint, with the cost of fertilizer included, we're going to test that situation. We're going to measure the yields, but also a benefit that I did not mention already. Not only does yield count, but the nutritional value that you're supplying to whatever animal you're growing this forage for. So we will be assessing the additional application of a potash application compared to the yield and also the nutritional variabilities as compared to no additional. So we'll be applying an additional potash application versus no potash application on 3 replications, and we'll repost that report later this year once we were able to receive our second harvest off of that crop. And this will hopefully be a continuing study that we're able to do over the next 3 years. So if you would like to learn more about this, we are going to have a forage field day that is going to specifically talk about this and work through an example of how we can utilize this information to benefit us on various scales of forage production. Not only will we be talking about forage fertility, but we'll also be talking about the best practice for wet wrapping. What's the best moisture percentage, and how do we measure moisture in the field? That can be a very tough task if we don't have the necessary tools, but there's also some easy ways that we can do this as well. What is the proper moisture, and how do we find it? We'll also be talking about poisonous and noxious weeds. We'll focus a lot on poison hemlock and wild parsnip, which have been issues here for us in Brown County, not only for control, but also for consuming that for our livestock in their hay. So we want to make sure we're able to identify and manage those. Of course, we mentioned forage stand health is a great way, but we'll also talk about herbicide options. So with those categories, we're able to offer recertification for private pesticide category 2, which is forage and livestock. And we'll also offer recertification for private and commercial fertilizer category 15. This will be from 9 a.m. to 12 o'clock noon, Saturday, August 28th at Scott Farms in Georgetown, and they are located at 9681 US Route 68. Again, registration is free. It begins 8:30 a.m. to 9 o'clock a.m. for check-in at the farm, and we'll also be having presentations and demonstrations to go along with this. So our hay wrapping presentation will also be accompanied by some demos, And we'll also be showing some equipment in there to offer any answers to questions you may have, whether you're purchasing or looking at your options to utilize this equipment for your operation. 9 a.m. to 12 o'clock will be this program, no cost to register, but please register beforehand so that we can have a head count and see if it's going to still, and see how many we're going to be able to prepare for Saturday, August 28th. So please register by August 25th at 4:30 p.m. as we will be preparing program material for that. Meals will not be provided. We will have water available, but if you're planning on bringing breakfast, you can do so. You're more than welcome to do that. If you have any questions, contact the Brown County Extension Office. Our number is located there on the flyer, and also my email is available there for that as well. You can also go online to register for free at go.osu.edu/foragefd. Again, that link is available right down there at the bottom in the registration bottom right corner of that flyer. That flyer is also available on our Facebook and website.